Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Brever, and alongside me is Logan Camden, and we have a jam-packed show for you all today. We're going to be breaking down all of the Game 6 action from across the NBA and previewing the two conference semifinal series that are set to start this weekend. But we got to start, Logan, with the first round series that is still alive, that has consistently been the most competitive, the most exciting. It is now going 7. The Kings came back after losing 3 straight and had a resounding road win to tie things up. What was your biggest takeaway from this? What were the keys?
I think the biggest key was, consistent offense is where we can start off. I mean, that's been one of my biggest red flags about the Dubs, through the regular season and here in this game as well in this series is consistent offense. It's weird. We haven't really seen a game like this where Wiggins, Poole, and Clay aren't really consistent, aren't really reliable throughout the night. This was a mid-Steph game. And when you get a mid-Steph game, you need the other guys around you to step up, and they just didn't. Wiggins, Poole, and Clay all struggled. They post an abysmal 89.9 offensive rating in this game. Only 25% of their shots came at the rim. They converted an abysmal 41% of their at-rim attempts. That's the worst mark of any team in the playoffs thus far. And so when you have that, right, when you have a game where Steph does not go nuclear, when Jordan Poole does not have a great game, when Wiggins does not pull his weight, when Clay does not have a great game, what do you need to have happen on the other end? Well, you need to play great defense. And that is where I was most disappointed with the Warriors tonight. That was in transition and just effort-wise. I just thought the Kings outran them and out-hustled them, dude. Consistently, the Warriors get a bucket. I'm sitting there going, wow, okay, here we come. It always felt in this game, and I don't know if this is because we've seen so many title runs, I just kept waiting for that Dubs run where they pulled ahead and they kept pulling, and it never came, mostly because the Kings always had an answer. You get a bucket, and they are immediately running on the other end of the floor, and they're trying to score. So, one, I just think they outran them. They tried to get upbeat. They tried to stop those runs in their tracks, and they didn't have an answer for De'Aaron Fox or Malik Monk. That has been the one consistent thing that we've seen throughout this series is there's no one fast-footed enough on the defensive end to stop these guys in their tracks. Malik balled out this game, man. This was an awesome Malik game out of the pick and roll. I'm not just talking scoring and getting buckets-wise, man. We saw some really good passing and decision-making from Malik in this game. And it's sad, dude, because I think this is a game that Golden State could have taken. You have another really bad Herder game. You have another bad Domas game. I mean, I think this is the worst that we've seen Domas in this series. He gets those fouls early, fouls out of this game too. But the two best offensive players in this game were on Sacramento's side, in my opinion, dude. Fox and Monk were just unstoppable. They outscore Golden State 44-36 in the paint. And like I said, when you're not getting that consistent offense, you have to get it back somewhere in winning plays or in effort plays or in defense, and you just didn't get that from Golden State. Golden State gets out-rebounded 53-42 in this game. They get crushed on the offensive glass 18-11. This was a nightmarish game for Golden State. This is the worst I've seen them in the series, and it's a real stark contrast from the last two games we saw from Golden State where me and you were sitting here going, wow, I wonder if Golden State has hit their championship stride. I'm not panicking. I'm not worried. I know Golden State, the true measure is going to be in this game with their backs against the wall. Obviously, there's a lot on the line here. I trust their championship identity, but the inconsistency is a little bit alarming for Golden State, and it's very disappointing. Flat out, I just didn't think anything went right for Golden State in this game. As close as they got, this is the worst I've seen Golden State play in these playoffs.
I absolutely agree. I thought that game 1, obviously, although it was a loss, we saw them have some really impressive offensive moments. This was just a situation where the Kings pretty much outclassed them throughout and really separated in that second half. But it's interesting to me that you started with the offense, because I think you have to start with the opposite side of the ball and the consistency with which Malik Monk and De'Aaron Fox were getting downhill penetration. And this was the problem in games 1 and 2, right? It was those guys just consistently getting into the teeth of the defense and then finishing themselves or creating opportunities for others. And this was one of only a couple games in this series in which we've really seen the Kings shoot well and capitalize on strong playmaking from their guards. And so they had those guys getting to the rim, finishing at a high level. They had 17 made threes in this one. I thought they were super opportunistic in those transitions, semi-transition situations, attacking a defense that wasn't fully set. But even in the half court, man, this is what I've talked about a few times throughout this series. The Kings have changed their offensive identity. And keep in mind, this was an offensive identity that led them to be the most efficient in the league this year. But they were so predicated upon running through Sabonis, him touching the ball every possession, the handoffs, the off-ball movement, the creative screening away from the ball. They barely ever ran pick and roll. They were the number 29 pick and roll offense in the regular season in terms of frequency. Playoffs, they are the third most frequent pick and roll offense. And it is because they have come to a point where Sabonis is not playing well, is certainly one part of it. But the other dynamic is the Warriors cannot contain their two dynamic, hyper quick guards. And this was one of the most glaring instances of that. And I think those two deserve so much credit. And this was a spot where it wasn't a ton of the like crazy intermediate shot making from De'Aaron Fox that we have seen at spots in this series. They were just getting the looks they wanted, man. They both shot well from deep, but a lot of it was at the rim. Malik Monk continues to just eat up free throws. And if you just look at the guys who are consuming a majority of the guard minutes for the Warriors, Klay just doesn't have a prayer, man. I love him. He is a great defensive guard over the scope of his career. He has clearly regressed. He is slower on his feet. And this would never have been an ideal matchup for him because these are smaller, very quick guards. Poole obviously is a glaring defensive liability and a liability overall in this game, yet again, which has happened too often throughout this series. So I do look at the minutes distribution and I go 22 for Poole when he's playing totally out of control, when he's finishing horribly, when he's taking bad shots. We get 10 GP2 minutes, who just, I thought, had a stellar outing in game 5, was great on the glass, always is going to be one of your best options to contain those great downhill guards at the point of attack, who was productive as a cutter offensively. For him to get shoved to the back of the rotation didn't make sense to me. And then I am really impressed with Moses Moody and his ability to step up and play legit rotational minutes in this series, Logan. Kuminga was the guy who we saw more consistently progress throughout the regular season. Moody is the guy who has asserted himself, who has confidently stepped into shots, and who has defended at a pretty high level. So I thought I would have been down to see more than 13 Moses Moody minutes. I just think Poole is at a point where when he's playing like this, you just got to yank him, because of course you can have the ceiling that you see in a game 4 type of scenario where all of these guys are clicking, and Poole is this dynamic pull-up jump shooter, and he can get downhill consistently, and he can make solid reads as a playmaker. But when he's not doing those things, he's not bringing you any value. And I just thought that this was really, really bad from him. I thought his minutes were destructive, and he's shooting 34% from the field in this entire series, Logan. And you talk about that at rim field goal percentage. I have some real issues with how Jordan Poole approaches finishing, honestly. I think he's incredibly skilled, obviously, but too often I feel that he overcomplicates things. He loves to finish with his right from the left side. Those wrong hand finishes, a couple of those went wrong tonight. He loves his scoop finishes. One of those got swatted tonight. Another one he just missed because he's just controlling the ball out there with one hand. And I just think there's definitely some refining that needs to be done there. So I agree, there's not much that went right for the Dubs tonight, but I will say the Kings continue to win with bad Domantas Sabonis, and in this game, largely without Domantas Sabonis, which is insane because there was one point this year where they were literally equivalent to the best offense in the NBA when he was on the court and the worst when he was off the court. He was that transformative. And I thought this regular season, especially pre-All-Star break, there was no question as to who was their best and most valuable player. He changed how they were able to play basketball completely. And this series, he has one more assist than turnover in totality. He's scored 15.5 points per game. And we have seen the Warriors give him fits when he tries to score on the interior. We've seen them pester him, Draymond getting his hands in there, poking balls out, Looney challenging him physically. And we know that he's not a super skilled post scorer, right? He's going to rely on pretty much brute force and then his touch with those close range shots, but he's not got a deep bag. So we've seen them force him into offensive fouls, Obviously, we've seen them concede jumpers to him repeatedly throughout this series, which totally limits the effectiveness of any action that you're running through him and obviously hurts the Kings spacing overall, allows you to have a second defender in the paint. So I thought it wasn't the worst thing that they were forced to go 5 out in this game and play Trey Lyles more minutes. Like, really, the only thing that Sabonis is doing well consistently in this series is rebounding. And we saw the Kings dominate on the offensive glass in the early stages of this game. There, Sabonis gets a ton of credit. But outside of that, I don't know that there's been a more disappointing star in these playoffs. In fact, I can pretty confidently say that there hasn't. Like, Giannis obviously underachieved. He played 2 games. Trey started ugly and then played some brilliant games. Sabonis has consistently, legitimately underachieved, and his team has had to change their style and have other guys excel for them to be hanging in there. And I give them the utmost credit for doing that, because this is a do or die spot against a dynasty on the road, and they stepped up and they completely outplayed them.
100%. I think the Warriors are giving you the blueprint on how to defend Domantas Sabonis. I mean, until he develops, we talked about this on last show, until he develops that mid-range shot. He hit a 3 early in this game that blew my mind, even though it was just wide open from the corner. I went, was that Domas? You know, I had to wipe my eyes a little bit. Until Domas develops that mid-range jumper, a floater, some touch shots in there, or a 3-point shot, I think this is how teams should defend him. I mean, the Warriors are giving you the blueprint on how to defend this guy, even in completely dropping in the pick and roll or doubling the ball handler in that situation. It's just more effective letting your help guy come over and help with Domas, or just coming back over late. It's way more effective. I want to touch on one more thing that you mentioned. I just want to get some context behind these numbers in transition. I mean, so disappointing. Carson, Sacramento had an offensive rating of 126.3 in transition compared to the Warriors, who were at 69.2. That's abysmal, man. I mean, that's abysmal. And consistently, I think that's where we saw the biggest discrepancy. There was a bad possession by Jordan Poole, too, where he's not getting back. I don't know, man. It was weird, too. There were a lot of guys off. It was a bad defensive performance. I just didn't see that championship energy and synergy that I've come to expect from Golden State, not only night to night, but just consistently in the playoffs. I think this is the most disappointed. I don't know if I can say that. Milwaukee's probably entire series was the most disappointed I've been with any one team. But in an individual game, this is the most disappointed I've been in a team, not only because it feels like a must-win game here. Again, when the Kings' second star is so off, he's in foul trouble early. Kevin Huerter is not having a great game. I know Keegan Murray made a lot of threes in this game, did not shoot well from the floor. He ate on the glass. I'll give Keegan a lot of credit for his effort on the glass. But again, this is a Warriors team that has struggled on the road, and this felt like a must-win. We got to close the door right now, because Sacramento Stadium, it is going to be raucous in Game 7. This is a Warriors team that we all know has struggled on the road consistently. This is a very tough Game 7, and what I think is going to be a very, very tough environment. I think it's going to be – I think that place is going to be jumping, Carson. I think it's just going to be a tough place to play. And this just felt like a really big game for Golden State, where they needed to shut the door. And I'm disappointed that they weren't able to get it done.
So what is your prediction for Game 7?
I'm still taking the Warriors. I don't want to make it seem – we talk about the biggest thing, I think, in predicting basketball games and with what we've seen from every series is sustainability. And I can count on the Warriors formula because I've seen it so many times, and maybe I'll be wrong. I've been wrong many a time. You know, there is a world where I can see Fox and Monk just eating again, but this is a Warriors team where I know the formula. I've also seen this Warriors team with their backs against the wall, and I've seen them flip that switch time and time again. So for consistency, for reliability, for what I've seen with my own eyes, there's still a part of me, even though they've struggled on the road, I just trust Golden State more, and they've also got the best player in this series in Stephen Curry. And so, yeah, I'm still going with Golden State for Game 7. Are you with me, or are you feeling Sacramento now?
I'm with you, and they don't just have the best player in this series. They have the best player in the series by a country mile, because they have a top 10 player of all time. And I think that absolutely they need peak defensive intensity and effort consistently throughout 48 minutes. I think they need good Clay. And I think they either need very good Jordan Poole for 25 plus minutes or as little Jordan Poole as possible. And by the way, I misspoke. He ended up with 26 minutes in this game, Moody with 16. I think I noted those numbers a little bit before that garbage time stretch. But Jordan Poole playing as many minutes as Draymond Green in this game just makes no sense to me whatsoever, coming off of a Draymond masterclass. So I think a lot of this is going to come down to the sort of winning plays that we have seen the Warriors make in that game through 3 through 5 stretch, right? Looney's unbelievable dominance on the glass, the hustle stuff from DiVincenzo and from GP2, and the unbelievable all-around defensive dominance as a helper from Draymond Green. They just need to channel all that again. And this felt like a game where they didn't totally have that, but backs against the wall. I think you put the ball in Steph's hands as much as possible. Obviously, so much of his value comes away from the ball, but their most unguardable action is that Steph pick and roll, especially with the level of decision-making that we have seen from Looney and Draymond, just dissecting this Kings defense, spotting cutters, spotting shooters with regularity. You're going to get a good look out of Steph pick and roll basically no matter what, to me. So I thought early in this game, too, the Dubs were doing something that I wish they had stuck with, where they were using Poole as the screener. So you're initiating a switch with Keegan Murray, who just doesn't have a prayer. But they didn't consistently stick to that. I think in a game 7, we need to pull out all the chips. You do something like that. You go to Steph as much as possible. And I do think that they're the better team at their best. I think they have the better defensive personnel. I trust the winning plays element for them again. And I would say I trust their top 6 more. I think they have more impact guys throughout that entire group. I don't exactly trust Poole right now, but I do believe any of their top 6 is more likely to swing a game, make those kind of plays that are championship caliber plays than a Harrison Barnes or a Keegan Murray is for Sacramento. Those guys just don't step up to the plate in that same way. It's pretty much just got to be a big shooting night if they're going to have that kind of big impact on the game. So I do still like the Dubs in game 7. This was concerning. It was not good for them. And again, props to Sacramento. Mad props to Malik Monk, who has been one of my favorite NBA players for far too long, irrationally. And he's played some of his best basketball in this series. But I do think it's still Dubs in 7. The Lakers, meanwhile, Logan, in the other game 6 that we saw today, did not play with their food, and they put things away about as decisively as you could. What was your take on this performance from them?
The Lakers have continued to ascend in this series, and I hope they continue to ascend through these playoffs. I mean, I felt like the first 2 quarters of this game, I was like, this is peak Lakers basketball. This is what I've been waiting on. And what did it start with? It started with LeBron James actually choosing to control more of the game, like you laid out in last episode, Carson. Great job from D'Angelo Russell and Austin Reeves in the pick and roll. I thought that Reeves and Russell came out tonight and were just a lot more poised, a lot more ready for the moment, a lot. I can't quantify it. I can't really describe it. They just looked like they wanted it. They were attacking. They were hunting in the pick and roll. And I like when D'Lo's like that, man. I've seen D'Lo tentative. I've seen D'Lo scared. This was not a D'Lo that was intimidated. He was out there hunting. And then the biggest thing to me, too, is that LeBron was, 1, getting downhill in a lot of possessions, but 2, playing with his back to the basket and just drawing attention where, I mean, that's LeBron's biggest asset, I think, at this point. This is a guy who is older. He's not going to be able to control a game like young LeBron, like 2018, 2016 LeBron, where he can get downhill at will. Yes, he can, but that's going to take a bigger toll on his body as the playoffs go along and as a game goes along. So how do you maximize where LeBron is with where his body's at? Well, that's by just taking attention, getting into the low block, and letting a defender who's on the wing slide down because he knows he might have to help if LeBron rolls off. That just opens shots up for his teammates. And I thought early LeBron did a phenomenal job of doing little things like that, of getting downhill and creating good shots for his teammates. And so I thought offensively, you have Reeves and D'Lo great in the pick and roll, D'Lo tough shot making, LeBron controlling a lot more of this game. And the biggest thing too is This was just a smarter offense today. They looked different. They were attacking mismatches. They were getting it down to AD when they put a smaller guy on him. Everything today, they just leaned in to what they did well. And I've been waiting for this like light bulb to go off where they play smart offense. I saw smart offense from the Lakers tonight consistently, and that's what encouraged me most. And then on the other end, we knew what they could do defensively. This has been the keystone of the Lakers' identity since they've made these trades. Is we know that this defense can be great. They were making Desmond Bane work. They were making Ja Morant work. They were hustling early, making winning basketball plays. This might be the most impressed I've been with the Lakers all playoffs long. And I don't know, man. This might be the highest ceiling. I don't want to get overzealous. I don't want to get ahead of myself. This might be the highest ceiling I've seen reached of any team save Boston. But I mean, they're playing fucking Atlanta, dude. Of course I expected that out of Boston. This is the Lakers game I have been waiting on. You know, I don't know if we're going to be able to get consistent D'Lo like this, where he is just knocking down every single tough shot that he makes. I don't think that's sustainable, but everything else I was super impressed with. And I do think a lot of these things that we saw the Lakers do is sustainable, specifically LeBron controlling more of this game and the great defensive intensity and the Lakers playing smart offensive basketball. Get switches, attack your mismatches. I was very impressed with the Lakers. They ran them out of the building in the first half, built on it in the third. I was as a big Lakers supporter, and as two guys who were very heavily criticized for supporting the Lakers and picking them deep in these playoffs, I was very, very pleased with their effort, with their intensity, and their all-around performance, man. Thank you, LA. This is what I've been waiting on.
It's really interesting how much this team's range between dominance and disappointment has swung on a few key factors. And one of them absolutely is the play of their backcourt. And I think Reeves has been more consistently good. He's a better two-way player. I think he's a better decision maker. He was a 90th percentile pick and roll scorer this year. He's a very willing catch and shooter. He just has a more consistent impact on the game no matter what. D'Lo is more dependent on that difficult shot making. I'm going to control this possession. I'm going to take a tough shot. If I make it, great. If I miss it, it's pretty frustrating. But when you get 42 and 14 combined from those two guys, there is certainly not a better team out west to me. And the Lakers are my favorite right now. I don't think we can deny how dominant a level they can reach defensively. And that's another big swing factor. How dialed in are they on that end? Because we've seen it, man. We saw the 9-point first quarter, and we saw it tonight. 15 blocks, man. There is so much length and athleticism on this interior defense with a top 2 defensive anchor on the planet, Anthony Davis, who I put in a tier only with Draymond Green, driving it all. And so you had both sides of it. And I love what you bring up about how consistently they were finding AD on the interior, out of pick and roll, him sealing off smaller guys. I thought they had a lot of good entry passes. So you got to give credit to the guards for getting their own and then for setting up the big fella. They were working the side pick and roll with LeBron too, which they love, getting him good looks at jumpers. So he still didn't command the game in typical LeBron fashion in this one. He was opportunistic in transition. He got some good looks at jumpers. And so he got his 22 on 13 shots. He didn't have to go above and beyond. And he hasn't once in this series for an entire game, which I guess is a testament to this team. It's a good thing. I've talked about how I want to see that top tier LeBron, but he hasn't been forced into that top gear. But D'Lo is a key swing factor here, man. In their losses in this series, he dropped 8 a night on 35% true shooting. In their wins, he dropped 21 a night on 62% true shooting. So I do worry about the wild inconsistency with him, but I do feel like Reeves is a bit of a security blanket there. Top tier LeBron and AD dialed in how much they can exert themselves offensively is a security blanket, and the overall depth and versatility and defensive ceiling of this team. And I do just want to give them an extra shout out on that end because Ja settled all night and I thought was completely intimidated by AD, which you don't see from Ja Morant. We saw Ja go right at Rudy Gobert a couple years ago second year Ja Morant and drop 40 on him, attack the rim over and over and over again. And he did not do that in this game. I think on every half court drive that ended with an attempt from him, he was blocked 3 times and then he had 2 turnovers, which is just an astounding performance against one of the great downhill guards we've ever seen. And then they stifled Triple J. And if it was 80 1-on-1, if it was LeBron 1-on-1, or if it was either of those guys with some help, he just had no chance. And their additional rim protection is really good. Braun, Vando, even Austin Reeves blocked 2 shots in this game. Wenyen Gabriel, when he plays, is another long, athletic, strong defender. So teams are going to have a hard time scoring on this team, man. They shrink the court. They protect the rim probably at a higher level than anybody else. And they have offensively 2 top-tier players when they're dialed in on that end, and a couple of really good supporting pieces. And then you have your true role players like your Rui Hachimuras, who I thought had another good game and continues to show his shot making and athleticism. So I do think that they have the highest ceiling. But I think the flip side of this is that the Grizzlies remain a disappointment. And neither you or I has ever drank the Kool-Aid on them as a playoff team. Half-court offense is too bad. Spot-up shooting is too bad. We've talked about these things. We both picked the Lakers to win in 6, and that's what happened. But how concerned are you about what you saw from them for the second straight year being the 2 seed and not playing up to their seeding in the playoffs?
You have to be disappointed. I mean, they're in basketball purgatory. You're in no man's land. And it's different in this NBA, right? For a long time, no man's land was picking in the late lottery or one of those struggling playoff teams at the bottom seed. The league's so competitive now, Carson, I feel like we're going to get to a point where, not that the Jimmy Butler thing's consistent, but I think we're going to see a lot more parity between teams in the playoffs where seeding isn't as important. And it's really important just the talent that you have on your roster. Like, we are getting to a point in the league today where every team is loaded and stacked with talent. Mm-hmm. What I mean by that with Memphis is they're not in traditional basketball purgatory. This is a team that's going to be great every single year. This is going to be a team that's going to be consistently good in the regular season and consistently make it there. But you're in purgatory in the sense that, are you ever going to win a playoff series? Are you going to be able to get over that hump? Is your star player still going to have issues where he can be exploited in the playoffs, where you can give him that jumper consistently, you can give him that pull-up, you can make him work for those tough shots and take away the paint with a really good rim protector and take him out, X him out effectively. And the biggest thing is about them, what we have talked about for, I feel like, 2 years now, Carson, them getting that second star. I don't know if Triple J is going to ever expand his game to being legitimate as an offensive guy. Now, I think there's things that Triple J can do to make himself better. Very encouraging this season. Attacking mismatches, being more aggressive when you get smaller guys on you, just being more physical in general, using that big body and big frame and strong body to go down on a low block and get easier buckets. Is he ever going to be an offensive superstar? No, I doubt it. And so now, again, the crossroads and question we find ourselves at with the Memphis Grizzlies is, how do you get that second star for Ja Morant? How do you get that second offensive piece to put you over the top? I don't know that he exists, Carson, and I don't know how they're going to be able to find him. Shout out them for, swinging on Zaire Williams. I still like his game. I don't know if he's a star. I don't know what you do to really get better to maximize yourself without selling off a star in hopes of finding a better one. You know what I mean? I don't know if Memphis can do it. And you look at the pieces that they currently have and how they're currently constructed. I mean, I don't know, man. This is not a team I would pick to win a playoff series next year. I know a lot can change in one offseason, and we'll see what happens, because I do think Memphis needs to retool slightly, needs to rebuild and tinker with some things. But yeah, I think they are effectively in no man's land where you're stuck between real contention and rebuilding.
And it's not just the second star element. They, first of all, need a better number one option if they want to legitimately contend. I still think that Ja is too exploitable with his willingness to take jump shots and his propensity to miss them. Like, he's a 31% three-point shooter who's going to take his 5 a night in the playoffs, even more than that. And that can constrict your offense, especially when you're playing him with might as well be a non-shooter in Dillon Brooks. Actually, much worse, a very willing shooter who was going to miss.
That's step one. I mean, that's step
Yeah.
one, actually, for Memphis. You, ni hao, Dillon. You send him off to China. You let him do his thing over there. And, like, dude, I said all series long, like, if you're playing Luke Kennard, that's a guy that you have to respect on the wing. You have to stick to him like glue over there, and it just creates more space for your offense. The Lakers don't care about Dillon Brooks, guys. I don't care what he brings defensively. He's like Andre Roberson, man. He should not be out there playing. He's that bad offensively. I think his goose is cooked, and I think that is step one for the Memphis Grizzlies, is to give Dillon Brooks the boot and find someone else to take his rotational minutes.
It's a legitimate problem. This has just never been a good perimeter shooting team. 23rd in three-point percentage in the regular season, 31% from deep in this series. So especially when you're trying to build around a dynamic downhill guard like Ja, the best thing you can do is put a ton of shooting around him, and they haven't done that. Of course, Bane is a phenomenal shooter who just was a bit off tonight, but Triple J's shot has come and gone consistently. They're playing him alongside another big, whether it's Tillman now with the Adams injury or Adams, non-floor spacer, and then Dillon Brooks is Dillon Bricks, man. And their bench has clearly regressed. All love in the world to Tyus Jones and Nuke Kennard, but the losses of the Kyle Anderson and DeAnthony Meltons and Brandon Clark due to injury here, I think all of that stuff matters. But the most concerning thing to me probably was how much Triple J regressed, because he was so good offensively in like the last 12 games of the regular season. And then game one of this series, he was dropping like 25 a night very efficiently, more physical than we'd ever seen him, more committed to getting downhill, attacking out of the post. His short range touch shots, the hooks, the floaters were money. And it was like a different guy than we'd ever seen for a stretch that long. And then his last 5 games in the series, Logan, he was 15 a night, 35% from the field, 24% from deep. And that sadly has been too often the Triple J story. Inconsistency offensively. He clearly got much better this year, point blank. This 5-game stretch doesn't take away from that, because there were times last year where a lot of times, in fact, he was a bad offensive player. This year, he was a good offensive player, but this was an ugly end to the year after such a promising stretch. So listen, until I see some real changes and I see this team excel in the areas that matter in playoff basketball, number one being half-court offense. This is a bottom third half-court offense. Last year was the same story. So you're not going to convince me you're a contender until that changes. And that's that. Let's quickly touch on Hawks Celtics here, because this looked like it was going to be a snoozer of a series through 2 games. And I give the Hawks a lot of credit for putting up a legitimate fight all the way down to the wire in this game, making this a legitimate series. But the Celtics advance. What's your take on this for them?
A lot of the same things that we said last episode, so I don't want to belabor any of these points. We do need to just get rid of bad Celtics, the bad Celtics that show up some nights.
Oh, that'd be nice.
Hey, man, if that happens, I think they could be world champions. Carson, call me crazy. It's just the black and white Celtics that we get, man. They're so hot and cold sometimes, and it's not for an entire game. It's for stretches. I mean, even back to the finals, dude, where Jaylen Brown, man, goes to the line, and that swung the series, that game, those moments right there. We just need to see the Celtics be better in clutch moments. We need to see Tatum consistently get downhill and be a threat. He had 7 assists in this game, 30 points, 14 boards. It looked like a completely different Jayson Tatum, the Jayson Tatum that I am quite more fond of, if I am honest with you. He's just a better player. So I think it starts with Tatum forcing himself, get downhill, create opportunities for your teammates, be the guy, create more consistent shots, cut out the turnovers, cut out the mistakes, because under the lights, the Boston Celtics have consistently disappointed us. And see, like, this is not the big stage that I expect them to even sweat or collapse under. It's the Eastern Conference Finals, and it's the finals. And that's what really concerns me. But it's just getting rid of those bad nights and those bad possessions and those bad runs that the Boston Celtics are unfortunately partial to. It happens to them more than it does anybody else, and they are much too talented of a team to let that stop them. If we can see more of the good Celtics and less of the bad Celtics, to boil it down to something as simple as that, it's just something that the Celtics are liable to have happen to them. It feels like any given game. I still think this is the best team in basketball. I think they are the most talented. They're just not the most consistent. And that's what I want to see more out of the Boston Celtics. That starts with Jayson Tatum being the best version of himself as a downhill scoring threat, because that opens up everything else for Boston.
And this was a game in which we saw very good crunch time Boston after such a memorable collapse throughout the fourth quarter. I mean, Jaylen Brown was just exerting downhill force, man. He was getting to the rim.
Yeah, I just want to say quick, that is another thing that I think we should hit on. Bro, Jaylen, I'm going to steal one of your lines, bro. You've been banging this out for about 3 pods now. I'm going to steal it real quick. I'm going to use a Carson Brever line.
Yeah, go for it.
Jaylen Brown has been nails in the fourth quarter, bro. I'm not even quite sure I know what that means, man. If that's a Bay Area saying,
I don't think so.
Where you picked that up, man, off the streets. Jaylen Brown has been disgusting in the fourth quarters of a lot of these games from the second half of this season to this series. Jaylen Brown has been a damn good closer in difficult shot making and getting downhill, like you said. If we can get more of that, I mean, that just puts Boston over the top where, I mean, they're two just almost superstars. If Jaylen Brown is doing this consistently late game where you can alleviate more of that pressure off Jayson Tatum, the Celtics are even in a different class. I already think they're up here in one of the best teams in basketball. If Jaylen Brown can continue to close out games and be this ice cold late, it takes them up another notch consistently through these playoffs. And in the second half of this season, Jaylen Brown has been one of the best, I won't even say on this team, one of the best closers in basketball, period. He's been great.
You know, people want to talk about who's Batman, who's Robin on this team. Who's the one wearing a sick black mask, Logan? Does it need to go any deeper than that? Jaylen was phenomenal, but also you got to give credit to Tatum for making good decisions. And what I love so much about this team, and why if I had more faith in Tatum to consistently make good decisions and be an efficient scorer of the basketball, they would be the runaway title favorite. And I do still think they're the title favorite now with Milwaukee out of the field, is the amount of skilled basketball players who are on the floor at all times. Last week, I called them the epitome of modern basketball because they have so many good ball handlers, decision makers, shooters, defenders who can guard multiple positions. And what shows that better than them running like Tatum smart pick and roll down the stretch here and having smart dissect guys off the short roll, because you got Al Horford, you're big in the corner who can make big shots. It's just like, it's beautiful. There's so much space. There's so many guys who you trust in that big moment. And they shot the hell out of the ball in this series, made 16 threes a night at 41% efficiency. Their shooting ceiling is incredibly high. And it was another game where the complementary guys were really good. Marcus Smart, 22 and 4 assists. Malcolm Brogdon, 17 and 4 assists, was awesome from that floater range. And Derek White didn't have a very big offensive game, but defended at a high level and was so great overall in this series. And I think it's a very specific thing, Logan, but might be the best trailing pick and roll defender I've ever seen. The best rear view contester. Like, he legitimately blocks shots all the time, trailing out a pick and roll. It probably happened to Trey 5 times in this series. His timing is unbelievable, and his pursuit, his effort, the guy absolutely deserves to be all defense. So sure, they can reach low points offensively in the clutch. There's no question about that, but they undoubtedly have the highest ceiling in the NBA. And I know that people rag on them for how this series went down towards the end. I thought it was really just game 5 was bad. Game 5 showed us everything about the bad Celtics. There's no denying that. But this game, I didn't think it was like, oh man, they should have ran the Hawks. I thought the Hawks mostly played well. So what is your take just very quickly on this for Atlanta, having come back and made this a more legitimate, respectable first round exit?
It's a really good question, Carson. And I mean, there's a lot of pieces. That's consistently been the most frustrating thing about the Atlanta Hawks, is how many individual pieces that I really do like here, from Capella to Hunter to DeJounte Murray to Trey to Big O to Bogdan to Jalen Johnson to AJ Griffin. I mean, these are the Atlanta Hawks are like the on paper NBA Finals champions. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like they have a really, really good roster. It's just about making the puzzle pieces fit together. And personally, I know this is a tough thing to do, especially after you make a trade for DeJounte Murray and you commit to him as potentially your second star. I think you lean into the skid. If Trae Young is going to be your guy, it's kind of like the Luka thing and going out and getting Kyrie, getting another ball handler. If you're not going to stagger those minutes, I don't think it's as effective. Go get yourself a good six man who can go fill it up if you want a guy to take the ball out of Trae's hands. If you're going to build around Trae Young, if Trae Young is going to be your superstar, then I think you lean into what he does well. And I think you get him, like you said, man, as much space as possible. You keep
Yeah.
some of these rim runners around here. If that's, I would personally try to move Capella and keep Big O for the future. I think Onyeka is the shit. I think he's the man.
Mm-hmm.
I'd probably keep Dre. I know his shot is inconsistent. He can disappear night to night, but he's a decent catch and shooter. He's a really good defender. I think you retool, but you maximize as much space and you get as many shooters around Trae Young as possible. And you try to make this one of the best offenses in the NBA because we've seen Trae do that repeatedly. Make this team one of the best offenses in the NBA. If you can just get them to give effort defensively, I mean, they'll be great. So if that's moving DeJounte, if that's moving some really good pieces that you like, I think you explore it. You give Trae as much space as possible. And if you want that secondary creator, don't put him alongside Trae. Give Trae a bunch of shooting and a bunch of space, and you get a good six man who you can put in non-Trae minutes and just go out there and fill it up. I don't like the fit with DeJounte Murray. DeJounte had some good games here, man. He had some tough shot making. DeJounte Murray's a good basketball player, but I don't think the fit is immaculate here, and I'd rather have a guy who can space the floor. Honestly, this might seem crazy. I'd rather have Bogdan out there, man. Bogdan's nasty off the catch. Bogdan knocks down crazy shots. I just think the offense could reach higher heights. I know he makes them better defensively, but I would do a dramatic retool here, man. I would see what you can do, and I would lean into the skid, and I would commit to Trae long term. And I think that's what the Atlanta Hawks want to do.
How about instead of Bogey, a fella named Kevin Herter? I think
Oh, that'd
that
be
could
great,
work
man.
really
It's
nicely.
dude, it's crazy. It's almost like he's a really good, tough shot maker, really good spot up on DHOs.
Sure.
Crazy, man.
Yeah, listen, I don't think you're building a championship caliber team around Trae Young, but I do think the closest you can get is maximizing your defensive and shooting ceiling. Sure, I think Onyeka absolutely can be that guy to hold down the five, and then you get two-way wings who can shoot the hell out of the ball, and Trae's going to elevate your team offense, but I still think that there's limitations. I think that he's going to hold you back with how singularly he needs to dominate the ball. But at the same time, I don't think DeJounte is the guy who fits well, who has the off-ball shooting skill set. I think DeJounte is too limited to amplify Trae and vice versa. But I think his limitations as a shot maker, which we saw pop up again in game 6, right? He's never going to be a particularly efficient scorer, is going to limit you. His liability defensively. So I think that they've got to be committed to this for another year. And after that, you're going to have real decision time. I don't think DeJounte is going to make sense to retain. I'm sure they would love to move off of John Collins, but I don't really know who's going to be eager to do that. And they'll probably continue to try to make it work around Trae and eventually reach a point where he gets disgruntled, and that's bye-bye. That's my prediction for the 5-year plan for the Atlanta Hawks.